Hello and welcome to Coffee and Control, the podcast where I find fascinating people from within the world of control and convince them to answer all of my questions. I'm your host, Lucy Hodgins, and this episode is a little bit different from my regular podcasts because last month I attended the Conference on Decision and Control in the beautiful city of Rio de Janeiro, and whilst I was there I went to a ton of different talks, met some very wonderful people. This is just going to be a snippet of CDC. There were way more talks that I didn't manage to see than those that I did, and there were talks that I loved that didn't make it into this episode, but hopefully it gives you a little taste of what it was like. So get ready to hear about fresh and groundbreaking research on a vast array of topics, including control architecture, formal verification, extreme seeking, reinforcement learning, equitable mobility systems, and a whole lot more, as you join me on a journey to the Conference of Decision and Control 2025. So it is the first day of CDC, first day of the conference. It is workshop day. So yes, I am in Rio. I'm in a very lovely conference hotel, actually staying in the conference hotel this time, which is very exciting. I've already seen a lot of other fellow control engineers going to CDC. Also, Rio has been very nice. I have spent the last week in Rio itself, doing a lot of sightseeing and running and cycling and swimming, which has been very lovely. I'm about to go to the conference, hopefully talk to lots of lovely people about their research. Let's go. So I've just checked in to CDC. It's very exciting. But the thing that I wanted to mention was that in the corner there is loads of poster boards showcasing different historical female influences in automatic control. So this was put together by researchers at London University. And I just love that this is a thing. So there are, I think, maybe 9 or 10 different women in control who I had never heard of. Why have I never heard of any of these women? So examples of these women include Nina Thornhill, Bozena Pasek-Duncan, Irmgard Flugel-Lutz, and Maria Domenico Di Benedetto, just to name a few. And if you'd like to learn more about these women, the In Control podcast has just released an episode on exactly this topic, which I would definitely recommend listening to. Also, the team that created these banners have a survey where they're trying to collect data related to diversity within control, both in terms of gender, but also kind of goals and perspectives of researchers working in the field. So I will leave a link in the description if you'd be interested in filling this out to help them with their research. But yes, I do really love that people are starting to highlight the fascinating and amazing women in our field. Okay, I think workshops start pretty soon, so see you later.
My name is Alessandro Abate. I work at Oxford University Computer Science on control and verification of complex engineering systems, in particular AI systems. So our idea is to use techniques from control and verification to certify, to guarantee AI systems. I've given a talk titled Neural Proofs. This is a sound approach to synthesize certificates functions which are neural shaped, neural templated. Such functions are synthesized according to proof rules, which are requirements on the dynamics of the complex system of interest. And such proofs allow to certify that a system abides by complex requirement, in particular memory-dependent and non-Markovian requirements. These proofs can be characterized on the dynamics of the model and on the specification, and can be practically synthesized with an approach that blends machine learning, training neural networks, with a generalization step that a SAT modular theory solver does. So we are able to provide sound guarantees, sound certificates that are learned from data.
So a SAT solver is a program used to try to establish whether a particular formula involving Boolean variables is satisfiable. And Alessandra's talk fits into the broader picture of formal verification, which involves using mathematical reasoning and proof to verify that a system behaves as intended. There are actually a ton of different talks on formal verification at CDC, including the plenary lecture on the first proper day of the conference, which we'll get onto a little later in the episode.
My name is Megan Tucker. I'm an assistant professor at Georgia Tech. A summary of the talk would be that I think it's important for us to consider the layered architecture for personalizing human-robot systems. At the highest level, we want to be able to personalize these systems to be able to account for humans' individual needs, but we still want our systems to be safe, and so at the lowest level, we need to make sure that our safety-critical systems have the ability to be personalized at that high level. And so what does that look like? How do we do that? That was the essence of the talk.
So it's currently early afternoon of the first day of the conference. So this morning I went into a session on stochastic systems, so stochastic planning and control, which was very interesting. And then I went into a workshop on control theory architecture, which was so cool. I think every single one of the talks in that session was just fascinating. After that, a load of people from the control theory architecture session went out for lunch, so I went with them. It was kind of chaos. I think the little shack opposite the conference venue was very much not prepared for a bunch of control engineers just descending on it wanting food. But we did get served. It was very nice. It was very lovely chatting to all of the speakers and other PhD students in a very chill environment.
My name is Joe Moeller, and I'm a postdoc at Caltech. And my talk was about using category theory to generalize Lyapunov stability theory to broader classes of system, including hybrid systems.
So category theory refers to a general theory of mathematical structures and their relations. And I didn't know this when I spoke to him, but it turns out that Joe has written a series of blog posts about category theory, which I would definitely recommend checking out if you would like to learn all about this. Now, another talk given in this workshop session was by Rodolf Zapolka. So I did manage to get an interview with him, but unfortunately I did not set up the microphones correctly, so it didn't record properly. So I'm going to try and give a little summary here about what that talk was about, because I did really enjoy it. Essentially, Rodolf's work combines continuous and discrete control through spiking event-based control systems, where you have things happening when a particular continuous signal spikes above a certain level. And Rodolf had previously used this to control a pendulum, but this talk discussed how to scale this up to be able to apply it to control a soft robotic snake. So the architecture that he used combined rebound excitability, which is a phenomenon that shows up in neuroscience, with a winner-takes-all network. And Rodolf and his collaborators were able to show that this structure is hierarchical. So you can combine instances of these networks together, and the resulting network exhibits the same kind of behaviours. I've linked the paper below. You can also listen to one of the early In Control episodes where Rodolf goes into a lot more detail on his work on spike and control systems.
Hi, I'm Raj. I am a PhD student in the EC department at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I work on decision-making under uncertainty, and when you think of decision-making under uncertainty, most of the times you model the uncertainty as something stochastic, but it often can be the case where the uncertainty is not stochastic, but it is generated by some other agent with some other incentives in mind. So my research tries to think about what kind of information structures arise in the equilibrium in this particular game between the information provider and the person taking decisions under uncertainty. And I think one of the cool things that I got to do with my research was actually test this on human subjects and see what happens. And do people change their decisions when they know that the information is being provided by someone strategic compared to the information just being there and it's stochastic? And I mean, like the teaser is they do change. So it matters on who's giving the information and what are their incentives.
Hello, my name is Vijay, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And my research revolves around what is called information design, which is the game theoretic concept the game theoretic study rather, of how best to share information across multiple strategic agents. And the focus of my work sort of is this, that if you don't know how the other person that you're talking to is going to respond to the information that you're sharing with them, how do you learn how to share information with them? And I think the key element here is that when you are trying to learn something, you're typically trying out very different ways. You're exploring your strategy space. And what that would mean in this context of information design is that the other person that sees you trying out very different strategies, using very different information sharing strategies, would think something's wrong with you, right? They would think that you're crazy and you keep saying a different thing at every second step. So my research tries to incorporate this into the model of how you can learn in this type of a setup by assuming the receivers that are getting this information have some type of a memory.
So it's currently the end of the workshops on the first day of the conference. I'm kind of going between different sessions this afternoon. I've just come out of a session on game theory. Also, I had a long conversation with John Doyle, which was unexpected. And he was kind of telling me about his recent research on cancer control and also kind of architecture of social systems, which was very interesting. Was not expecting that interaction this afternoon.
For anyone who doesn't know who John Doyle is, he made huge advances in robust control in the 1980s and 90s and has done a ton of interesting work since then. I've left a link below to his In Control interview if you would like to find out more about his work. He is an absolute legend in the field, and I actually ended up sitting next to him in the control theory architecture workshop and was then very excited to actually get to speak to him later on. And that's actually one of the things that I really love about control conferences is that you get to meet these people that are like super famous within the field of control, and then you talk to them and you realise that they're just like normal people and are actually really friendly and approachable.
Okay, so it's currently about 9 o'clock on the first proper day of the conference. So I went to the plenary lecture this morning, which was interesting. It was on formal verification language and then using that for distributed systems and also links between that and control barrier functions. I was not really concentrating because I have my talk in about an hour and a half, and I am kind of nervous about it.
Okay, so whilst I was not entirely tuned into focusing on the plenary lecture at the time, it was live streamed and uploaded to YouTube, so I'm going to leave a link below to the full video, but here's a little bit of a taste of what it was actually like.
So, my name is Dimos Dimarogonas, I work at KTH, and I'm going to talk about using transient controllers to satisfy high-level multi-robot tasks. So my first statement for today is that while there has been a focus in the last 10 years on end-to-end approaches, I think current use cases and complexity of tasks call more and more for real-timeness, reactivity, reproducibility, repeatability of experiments, and thus feedback becomes again essential. The general theme I'm going to talk about today involves how can we design controllers that enhance these three features in multi-agent systems, the distributed, feedback, and task complexity. So there have been tremendous research efforts in multi-agent control, mainly using graph theoretic approaches, but I argue that mainly the focus has been in our community on simple cooperative control objectives such as formation and consensus. So around 2012, I put the question to myself, how can we ask a robotic system to perform more complex tasks? How can we get more interesting things from a robotic system? And back then, I became acquainted with this literature in robotics that use formal verification languages to define such complex tasks, and then derives controllers based on tools from computer science.
Okay, so it's currently 4 o'clock. I haven't been able to attend that many talks today because I've been doing long-form interviews for future episodes. However, I have just attended a session on adaptive control, which there were a few really interesting talks. So one of them, which I really enjoyed, was on the impact of attacks on controlling multi-agent systems and how to deal with that. I really enjoyed that. And then there was another one on extremum-seeking control inspired by insect wing flapping, which I thought was a really cool idea. Also, my talk this morning, I think went well. I definitely talked too quickly, but it was fun.
So, for anyone who might be interested, my CDC talk was on a framework for applying multiple model iterative learning control to nonlinear systems. So, essentially, this framework is designed for systems with very large model uncertainties, and instead of using a single model to design your ILC controller, you use a set of potential candidate models, and between each iteration, you identify the model that's closest to your true system and use that for control. Essentially, this paper was adapting and extending existing theory for linear systems to the nonlinear case, and the reason that we wanted to do this was that I'm hoping to apply this framework in the context of stroke rehabilitation, which is what I'm mostly doing my PhD research in.
And there were also some other really interesting talks. So actually the first presenter was Alberto Isidori, which was a bit insane to be presenting in the same session as him. And also he watched my talk, which was mad. So the session that my talk was in was on nonlinear control, which was basically a combination of like control barrier function based approaches and kind of classical control or like stabilization of nonlinear systems, and then ILC. This afternoon, I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to go into the session on extremum-seeking control or one of the sessions on biological systems, control of biological systems.
I'm Viktoria Gruszkowska from University of Klagenfurt in Austria, quite far away from here. And in this talk, I presented the results of our joint work with Sami Heiza from University of Cincinnati. And we were working on extremum-seeking problem, which means that we need to optimize some function without knowing actually the analytical expression of this function, but just using some measurements of this function. And so in this talk we presented some approach which is based on higher order Lie brackets, which allows us to get access to higher order derivatives of the cost function, and with this we obtained a better decay rate, namely exponential decay rate for polynomial cost functions with degree greater than quadratic one.
So, at the most basic level, a Lie bracket is an operator that takes two vector fields f and g and returns a third vector field corresponding to the derivative of g along the flow generated by f. And you can generalise this concept to arbitrary numbers of vector fields fi by calculating the Lie bracket of f1 and f2, then taking the output of this and calculating the Lie bracket between this and f3, and then continuing this for as many vector fields as you're interested in.
So I'm Jorge Poveda. I'm an associate professor at UC San Diego, and I presented some work on using event trigger control for extremum-seeking dynamics. So the main idea is to study how we can save some infrastructure when you are running these adaptive algorithms and you don't want to use these resources all the time, maybe on the input or on the output of the system, but you just want to perhaps sample or actuate based on events. So this is a well-known technique, event trigger control. So we just study how to formalize event trigger control into extremum-seeking systems. And to do that, we use tools from hybrid dynamical systems, because usually event trigger systems are hybrid systems. You have an interaction between continuous time dynamics and discrete time dynamics. This leads to closed-loop systems that are hybrid. And the key idea in extremum-seeking control is to use perturbation theory to solve model-free optimization problems. So the key problem to study is how to use this perturbation theory for hybrid systems to prove stability guarantees for the proposed dynamics. And that's what we did. So we showed that we can actually design well-posed event trigger algorithms, establish some stability results, well-posedness in terms of solutions, existence, completeness, absence of Zeno behavior. And we did that for extremum-seeking dynamics that use classic averaging theory, as well as for those that use Lie bracket averaging theory. And we show that both can be studied using tools from hybrid systems.
So I've just come out of a session on extremum-seeking control, which was very interesting. And now I'm just about to go to the Meet the Candidates poster session, which is designed for students or postdocs that are looking for faculty positions to kind of show off their research. But I'm hoping this is a good chance to kind of find out interesting things that various different people are doing and maybe get audio clips from them.
So the Meet the Candidates poster session ended up being so much fun. I met so many interesting and super smart researchers working on a wide variety of different topics, including network estimation, physics-informed learning, traffic control, game theory, and a load more, I actually decided that I would take the audio I collected and put it into a separate mini episode that's going to be released at some point in the next few weeks, so look out for that. The plenary lecture on the second day was titled AI Human Games, and it was super interesting. I actually managed to talk to the speaker after the session, who was very lovely, and the audio clip has the additional benefit of funky ambient background music that was playing in the room that we were in.
Okay, my name is also Zaglar. I'm a professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department. So the talk really was about, how can we think about AI agents making decisions in dynamic environments. And it has multiple dimensions. This is about how do agents learn about the environment, about other agents that they are interacting with. So I'm really focusing on multi-agent settings because when you think about AI agents, most promising applications really are thinking about agents being personalized assistants to humans or multiple AI agents collaborating to solve complex tasks together. So it's really important to understand how in these multi-agent scenarios, these agents learn both about the unknown environment and about each other and how they make good decisions. And, an important aspect of that is, of course, human-AI interaction. It's something that I think attracts a lot of attention lately because of the huge advances in AI and fears around AI replacing humans. There is, I think, a sort of paradigm in AI development that focuses a lot on AGI, artificial general intelligence, which tries to sort of make, superhuman AI agents that surpass humans. That's not my vision. I feel like the development should be how humans and AI work better together, how AI can enhance human flourishing. So that's sort of the view we're taking and trying to understand how can we design better AI systems that can actually augment humans, make better decisions. And the talk was about sort of thinking about a systematic framework for doing that.
So after the plenary lecture, I attended half of a session on robust control and then half of one on control system architecture. There were two super interesting talks in the robust control session. So one was by Matt Turner, who I've interviewed on the podcast before. He was talking about how to define L2 gain bounds for systems with quantized inputs. And then there was another talk given by Professor Kemin Zhu, and I have a short audio clip from him, but then I'm going to summarise his paper in a little bit more detail because I thought it was such a neat approach to the problem.
I just want to divide the control tasks into appropriate subtasks and let different controller to control each one. That's basically what I'm doing.
So this talk was about applying something known as multi-objective complementary control, which aims to improve disturbance rejection and performance of linear time-invariant systems. So the approach takes a H-infinity controller designed to maximize robustness and a linear quadratic Gaussian or LQG controller designed to maximize performance, and then it combines them in a particular structure that allows them to work together in a complementary way rather than enforcing a trade-off. After these two talks, I then hot-footed it over to the control architecture session where there were a load more fascinating talks.
Hello everyone, my name is Yujun Huang and I'm a PhD student currently in the Lab of Information and Intelligence Systems with Professor Giorgi Daldini at MIT. So our research focuses on the co-design of complicated systems, and our perspective is to provide a correct, in some sense, abstraction of system design framework for complicated systems. So what do we mean by correct abstraction here? We mean the abstraction or the mathematical framework should be able to cover the things that we actually care about in the real world about complicated systems. So the things that they can provide, the things that they require, and the options available for them. And we require the abstraction to be compositional, computational, and collaborative. What do you mean by compositional? It means that we have to be able to synthesize the analysis and the results from lower level systems, say the sensors, the autonomous vehicles themselves, to higher level performance systems, say the mobility system of a city. So deriving from this compositionality, we need collaborative. So different people or different domain experts should be able to contribute to different components, kind of independently of how other components contribute to the system. And we also require it to be computationally tractable for obvious reason. Otherwise, we will not be able to use this framework in practice. So that's an overview of co-design framework that we believe should be correct in this sense, the abstraction of system co-design.
If you would like to hear more about co-design, I actually recorded a full-length interview with Eugen's supervisor, Juele, at CDC. This framework is honestly so cool. I'm so excited to release that episode. It'll be out at some point later this year, although I'm not sure exactly when yet.
And this work that I presented is at CDC would be the correct abstraction in the above senses for uncertainty and distributions in this framework. Essentially, this is general enough to capture what we require and we care about in practice about everything about uncertainty, and it's computational, collaborative, and compositional.
So my name is Tyler Hanks. I'm a fifth-year PhD student at UF, so I'm about to graduate, and I'm at the GATA's lab, which is James Fairbanks' lab. And yeah, I just gave a talk about these things called coordination sheaves. Basically, they're a way to address really extreme amounts of heterogeneity in multi-agent systems and trying to coordinate multi-agent systems. So they enable you to work with systems that are living in different state spaces and having different dynamics models and also different coordination goals. And essentially, they're similar to like graphs and graph Laplacian-based methods, but they're generalization of that to coordination sheaves and sheaf Laplacians, and you get results about how running the sheaf Laplacian dynamics to convergence achieves the coordination goal. So it's a nice sort of unified framework to try to achieve different multi-agent coordination goals.
So, after a morning of lots of very interesting talks, it was at this point in the conference where I started to feel a little bit overwhelmed by the number of people and the amount of different information being thrown at me constantly. So, I spent a little bit of time just chilling by myself instead of attending the sessions. And in talking to various academics and other PhD students, this seems to be pretty normal. I think a lot of people find conferences a lot, and it's totally okay to take some time out of the conference to recuperate and then come back.
Okay, so this afternoon has been a little bit crazy. I did a very fun interview, and then I kind of went between a few talks, which were kind of interesting. But yeah, I'm currently at the NextCom social event, which is at a kind of beach hut during the sunset in Brazil, which is very picturesque, very nice. You can hear Brazilian music in the background. We're currently giving out coffee/flip-flops to all of the early careers researchers who are attending the event. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a good evening.
So, for context, NextCom is a group within Control System Society designed to foster a sense of community and leadership in early careers researchers within Control. They put on some really great events, and I recently released a bonus episode where I went into a lot more detail on exactly what their work looks like and how you can get involved.
So I am currently walking back to the hotel after the NextCom beach event, and yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. I was not, well, I said I wasn't expecting it. I'm not a very social person, and at the start there was a lot of people, and I was a bit scared and just standing on the edge. But it was really lovely. Like, I got to speak to a lot of, again, really nice like PhD students, postdocs, hear about their research. I didn't do any interviewing because I kind of wanted to just chill without sticking a microphone in people's face. But yes, it's just like really nice building connections with people throughout the course of a conference.
So the Friday plenary lecture was titled Generalization in Reinforcement Learning, From Foundational Results to New Frontiers. I was given by a researcher called Csaba Szepesveri. Again, I'm going to leave a link to the full talk in the description and give you a little taster here. In future, though, I am planning to make a full episode on reinforcement learning for control because there is so much cool work in this area.
So I also wanted to talk about, from the area perspective, what are the things that I think are missing? Because I think that there are big holes. So we need to talk about this. So the ambition of RL, and one of the reasons I came to RL, because I saw this as like this minimalist framework that helps me to understand what could be the algorithms that lead to intelligent behavior. But if I look at today of what we achieved and what we have, there's a lot of things that seem completely off. And so I just try to enumerate the few most important of these. The very first thing that feels really off is that everything that we do is kind of monolithic. It's like you write this equation and you solve an optimization problem, and just like that. You take a neural network and it's going to represent the policy, and okay, it's distributed, and you could say that there is some structure there, but that's all. There is no further structure, no layered architecture. People in RL also talk about the need for hierarchy, the need for time abstraction, action abstraction, all of these things. In current algorithms, this is not happening. In the control literature, I see people keep talking about the layered architectures. I really like that. I just wish we knew how to bring that formalism to RL, to create these systems that should be much better, should be much more capable of dealing with long horizon problems. Also, current RL is model-free, mostly. If you look at the algorithms that people actually use, they are mainly model-free. But clearly that cannot be the case. We should have the model. It's not like that people don't work on model-based algorithms. People do work on model-based algorithms. But those algorithms, when you try to translate them to practical problems, on the benchmarks, they don't seem to work that well. So much more work needs to be done there too. Unobserved state. So this is where we started, MDP framework.
So MDP stands for Markov Decision Process, and this is just the general problem setup to which reinforcement learning is applied.
Are we relying too heavily on the assumption that somehow the state is observed? Of course, your whole history is the state. But is that all? Do you need to go beyond that? People who are writing the algorithms that are able, deal with complicated, not simulated environments, robots, maybe throw in a recurrent neural network, an LSTM here and there, and that's their way of dealing with the state. Is that enough, or do we have to do other things? So I for sure know that we have to do other things, but it's a little bit unclear how. Lastly, RL is about reward and reward maximization, and that feels very off as well. Because I don't think that reward should be maximized, under all circumstances. It feels more like homeostasis is the right way of talking about how to build systems that are robust and capable. And I always do this, that RL is just maximizing rewards. It's like first approximation, and it's a good starting point. But maybe it's time to take it a little bit more seriously, because reward maximization might actually be holding us back because we are too hung up on it. And maybe there is easier algorithms that are not maximizing the reward, but just, keeping homeostasis. All right. Finally, what's the role of RL? Should RL be used, on board on a robot? Adaptation online, as originally it was thought? Or should it be used to create the basic algorithms that are running on board on the robot? So nature versus nurture. I think that you need both, but both are their own problems, and they need to work together. So one doesn't work without the other.
So just to summarise, the current big problems in RL research are working out how to create layered RL architectures, more research into model-based approaches, the current ad hoc treatment of unobserved states using neural networks or other machine learning tools, designing RL frameworks with a more nuanced goal than just maximising the reward, and examining how RL can be best incorporated into physical systems.
So, hello everyone, my name is Feng Yuyue. I'm a PhD student at Israel Institute of Technology, so under the supervision of Professor Daniel Zalazo. So I just gave a talk at IEEE conference on decision and control, and the topic is passivity analysis for nonlinear consensus on directed graphs. So this work, we studies the output consensus of the multi-agent networks that interact over directed graphs. One of our previous work has shown that when we want to use passivity theory to analyze the performance of directed networks, the passivity properties of the forward path may not be preserved. So in our this work, we use the idea of loop decomposition, and we developed compensation ideas so that we can still use passivity theory to analyze the multi-agent networks over directed graphs.
Been a good day so far. This morning, I went to see a talk by someone I met earlier in the conference on passivity-based analysis. I then went to 3 talks on hybrid systems, which was very interesting. Lots of work on kind of manifolds and abstract maths, but then applying that to control of hybrid systems or hybrid controllers. And then I went to the talk of a guy called Pio, who I know through Nextcom. His talk was really interesting as well. It was on sensor attacks and making sure that you can still estimate the state.
So in particular, this talk examined how to design a secure safety filter for nonlinear systems in the presence of sensor spoofing attacks. So in cases where an attacker can arbitrarily alter measurement values by injecting some error signal.
I'm just heading back to the conference after the Nextcom lunch event. Going to see the Bodhi lecture. Probably going to be a little bit late, but hopefully that'll be fine. But yes, Nextcom lunch event was very good. Lots of food. And it was really lovely to, again, connect with PhD students and postdocs and early careers researchers that I talked to last night. I've kind of met throughout the conference, kind of deepen those connections. That was really lovely.
So the Bodhi Lecture is an annual lecture given by the winner of the Henrik Bodhi Prize, which recognises distinguished contributions to control systems. This year it was given by Jacqueline Scherpen and titled A Quest to Tame Complex Control Systems. Specifically, it was focused on model reduction of nonlinear systems, and I found it really interesting. I actually covered aspects of this topic in a fair amount of detail in the episode that I made with Alberto Paduan, but something that we didn't cover that Jacqueline went into in her talk was model reduction of graph networks.
So the focus of this presentation will be model reduction for control, and I will zoom in further in the next few slides. I will talk about model reduction around an equilibrium point. I will also talk about model reduction around a trajectory. I will also talk about networks in a network interconnection setting. And in a network, what do you want? You also want, you have a large-scale network, you have inputs and outputs, and in the reduced order model, you want the reduced order model to be a network again. I will want to talk about consensus networks. I will talk here about the linear case. There are extensions to Lure systems, Lure network systems. But I will talk about the linear consensus network systems here, talking about simultaneously balancing of passive nodes and the Laplacian. And what is the idea behind that? So, first some examples of large-scale networks. I suppose all of you have seen all these pictures before. Multi-robot systems connected with each other, communicating with each other. The electricity grid, traffic systems, but also social media. That's huge, of course, with the interconnected network. And some biological systems. This is a disease network. Order reductions presenting graph structure are generally based also on clustering of the nodes. When you do clustering of the nodes, you still preserve sort of the graph structure. There's a lot of work that has been done on that not too long ago, in the past decade, and I'm working currently also on Lure systems in these nodes. We have structure preservation for power system reduction. Groan reduction is one of the topics. And I've also worked on projection-based reduction. But that was not the topic of this presentation. The topic of this presentation was balancing. So we take control consideration. All these considerations were not based on controllability and observability. So we're talking about balancing of consensus networks. So the idea is to balance the Laplacian and simultaneously of the passive systems on the nodes.
You may remember that the graph Laplacian was also mentioned by Tyler earlier in this episode, and this is a particular matrix representation of a graph and is defined as the difference between the degree matrix and the adjacency matrix of that graph.
So the idea is possibly, because if you do balancing, you mix states. Because you do a transformation of the states, and if you do a transformation of the states, you mix states, so you may lose the network structure. Reduce the system, possibly first destroying a network structure, and the reduced system, you should be able to associate it back to a network system.
The next part gets a little technical, and I wanted to clarify a key term up front. So, a semi-simple eigenvalue is one for which the geometric and algebraic multiplicity coincide. So, the number of times it appears as a root of the characteristic polynomial is the same as the dimension of its eigenspace.
So for a single integrated system with a Laplacian L, you want it to be equivalent to a system where you don't have the Laplacian. So it's mixed. That's not straightforward how to do that, because the L itself is usually has a semi-simple eigenvalue in 0. So separating the semi-simple part of the system does the trick. First apply generalized balancing then to the asymptotically stable part of the system. Generalized balancing, so you have to pick the gradients wisely. And then transform it to a Laplacian. And add the semi-simple part back. So it gives a guaranteed a priori error bound if you do it in this way.
So I'm Brooks Butler. I am a postdoc at UC Irvine. I'm working with Robot Ecology Lab, and the research I'm working on is looking at how we incorporate altruistic behaviors into autonomous systems based off of ecologically inspired ideas.
Hello, I'm Maggie. I'm a third-year PhD student from Germany, and I'm at the CDC in Rio. And today I gave a talk about hierarchical variational inequality problems.
So, for people interested in applications, one interesting place where variational inequalities comes up is in game theory, because in many cases it turns out that an effective way of solving Nash equilibrium problems is to first reformulate them as a variational inequality.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to talk a bit about how we try to solve these kind of problems. So the approach we came up with is a path-following double loop scheme where we have a auxiliary problem that we try to solve in a inner loop. And then in the outer loop, we update our parameters. And with updating the parameters, also the auxiliary problem changes. So then we go back to the inner loop and the new auxiliary problem is being solved. And then we were able to show, on the one hand, that our inner loop algorithm without a stopping criterion is converging to the solution of the auxiliary problem. And then we also showed that our outer loop is weakly converging with like an ergodic convergence type of result to a solution of the HVI problem, so of the both levels combined problem. And the nice thing about the approach, or what is probably like the most important result that we derived, is that we were able to get convergence rates, which is not that common for these kind of problems yet.
So I've just come out of the final session at CDC. So I ended up in a session on kind of transportation, well, smart cities, essentially. And there were two talks in particular that I really enjoyed. So one of them was on like water systems. So how we design kind of control estimation, state estimation of water systems to ensure, well, controlling hydraulics and also contamination. So that was really interesting. And then The other one that I saw was on the need to design technologies for our cities that are equitable and kind of transdisciplinary approach, and collaborating with social scientists to make sure we're designing technologies that actually has like a beneficial impact, essentially. And now I'm going to go off to the reception.
So, just before we finish off this episode with a quick montage of what people have enjoyed about CDC, I wanted to play a clip from the second of these talks that I mentioned, in which the speaker, Mauro Salazar, discusses work on designing fair and equitable transportation networks.
And now let me move to transportation, because this is the field where I've been working on, and I try to mobilize the theory of Karel Martens together with him to see if we can use optimization as a tool to reason about mobility systems in a more just way. So first and foremost, he challenges this kind of 100 years of minimizing the average travel time. What's the purpose of mobility? Basically, giving accessibility. It's a capability. Going from A to B, freedom of movement, right? In a reasonable manner, within a reasonable time, safety levels if you're cycling, cost, and so on and so forth. I think we all agree with this, right? That's why we design mobility systems. How should we do it with this capability? Remember, it's a capability. You don't have to travel, but you can if you want. Well, we can start with utilitarianism, right? Minimize the average travel time. But again, what about the worse off? And often they're the ones suffering from these utilitarian distributions. So Karel leveraged Walzer, Dworkin, Crisp to construct a theory for transport justice, which is based on sufficientarianism. Again, minimizing a deficit to a sufficiency threshold. Okay? So I just want to show you very briefly how we did this, so how we took his theory, his ideas, and operationalized them mathematically. I have two equations, but just to give you an idea also of the simplicity of these tools. He says basically, provide enough reachable destination. How do we frame this? Well, it's basically going to minimize the maximum, the non-negative result of this difference. So basically, if your number of destination NR is below a threshold, you will take that into account. You can square it in line with poverty metrics. You minimize it. So mathematically, trust me, sufficientarianism is very nice. And what happens? Well, if you implement utilitarian status quo, what you kind of come to learn is that what will happen is that you will use these cars to serve trips close to the center. Well, it makes sense. It's more efficient. Rebalancing is more efficient, less empty miles. But then people living further away from the center need to take another mode of transit, which possibly is beyond this sufficient level of travel time. If you implement sufficientarianism, the situation reverses. And it's kind of a no-brainer, right? And the interesting thing is that what's the cost in terms of travel time? No cost. You can be fair without losing efficiency. It's a no-brainer.
So it's currently the day after the conference. I'm flying home tonight. But yeah, CDC has been good. I have definitely enjoyed it. There's been times where it's been a bit overwhelming. But on the whole, very fun. Some interesting talks, interesting topics that I might make future podcast episodes on. And lots of like really, really lovely, interesting people. I think that has probably been my favourite part of CDC, like meeting some really lovely people.
Yeah, so what's been your favourite part of CDC? Maybe the part when my presentation was over.
I guess the beach event. My favorite part was meeting a lot of interesting and nice people, especially the woman in control lunch was really empowering, and the vibes overall were just really, really good.
Actually, reinforcement learning, because I belong to that section.
Yeah, to the reinforcement learning segment.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
I think my favorite part of CDC has been just like getting to meet cool people in controls. Of course, this is like the first big conference I've ever been to, and it's been really delightful to meet a bunch of people, you know, both in the field and they're just like wonderful, lovely people, especially the other, you know, students. It's just been a wonderful experience in that regard.
So, this has been a whistle-stop tour into a ton of different areas of control, but just to summarise a few of the key takeaways. So, control architecture is a fascinating area, with research spanning areas such as personalised human-robot systems, spiking control, and heterogeneous multi-agent systems. Reinforcement learning for control still has a lot of open problems, including lack of hierarchy and over-reliance on model-free methods and reward maximisation. Techniques from hybrid systems can be applied to enable event-triggered extremum-seeking control. Model reduction techniques are being applied to networks to allow for control of large-scale systems. And NextCom is a committee that hosts excellent events at control conferences to foster community and belonging in early careers researchers. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. This is the second conference special I have done, and I am interested to hear what you think. Maybe leave a comment below or connect with the podcast or with me directly on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts. I'd also like to thank IEEE CSS Outreach Fund for providing the microphones that make episodes like these possible. So the next 3 episodes are all going to be with guests that I interviewed at various points throughout CDC. They were all fantastic in their own very unique way. There will be a Meet the Candidates episode that I release at some point in the next few weeks, but the next full-length episode will be released on the 1st of February and will be an entire episode dedicated to game theory. It's going to be great. For the time being, Happy New Year, and I hope you have a wonderful start to 2026.